Good afternoon. My name is Mark Perlman. I'm one of the plaintiff attorneys in the matters we're going to be discussing today. To my right is Joey Lombardi. Joey is one of the plaintiffs in these matters. To my left is John Bowman. John will be speaking shortly, and he is one of the plaintiffs in this matter. And to John's left is Trusha Goff. Trusha is also one of the plaintiff lawyers in these matters. Today we're here to talk about 5 lawsuits that we've filed on behalf of 6 very brave plaintiffs against the Lake Bluff School District 65. These lawsuits involve repeated sexual abuse by Charles Ritz, a teacher, a coach, and a trusted adult at Lake, who was employed by Lake Bluff from 1975 to 1985. What we have discovered through our investigation, through police investigation, and otherwise, is that Lake Bluff School District was aware that Charles Ritz was acting inappropriately with children from the time he arrived at Lake Bluff Middle School. Yet, the school district did nothing about it. They continued to hide and conceal Charles Ritz and not warn the public or the students or their parents that Charles Ritz posed a risk to their children. Before I turn this over to John Bowman, I'd like to just make a couple general comments. One is, I'm very grateful to be standing here today on behalf of these very, very brave individuals. Not only Joey and John, but the other plaintiffs in these matters, in these 5 lawsuits. 1 out of 5 children is sexually abused. That's an outrageous number, 20 out of 100. Yet, of those 20 out of 100 that are abused, maybe 1 or 2 ever find the strength or the power to talk about it. The rest take it to their grave. Because of that, we are grateful for those that find the power and the strength to come forward and speak. Because without them, nothing changes. Because of those that have spoken up, lots of change has occurred over the last decade, positive change. But we can't do it without the likes of a Joey Lombardi or John Bowman, or those that find their voice and speak about these horrific crimes. Charles Ritz was a perpetrator of a crime. When this started, when the clients came forward to us, we're not talking about civil litigation. They had no desire for civil litigation. They wanted 2 things. First, they wanted the public to know that Charles Ritz was a perpetrator, that he was dangerous, and that if your child was around him, your child was at risk. They also wanted Charles Ritz prosecuted if they could get a prosecution. And to the credit of the Lake County State's Attorney, they did in fact prosecute Charles Ritz, and he pled guilty to a crime. The second thing our clients wanted was they wanted a dialogue with Lake Bluff School District 65, the defendants in this matter. And in that dialogue, they wanted to talk about what happened, where the failings were, and what could they do to ensure that something like this never happened again. Yet, remarkably, Lake Bluff School District refused to speak to our clients. They continuously turned them away. So I am very grateful to the plaintiffs in this matter who could have walked away and hid it in the shadows. Instead, what they've done is they are speaking up and they are demanding action. And for that, all of our children are safer. John?
Okay. Thank you, Mark. As Mark said, I am John Bowman. I wanted to start by thanking you all for being here. As I mentioned to a couple of you when you first got here today, when we were starting off with this 2 years ago, we struggled to get notoriety and attention to this important matter, and it was the press that was there. So I very much appreciate all of you being part of that, so thank you. let me start by giving you a little background on myself, and at the end of this, I'm happy to take some questions from you. So, I live in Texas. I'm 49 years old. I've got 2 children. I'm married. Work in the logistics industry. I was born in Lake Bluff. I graduated from what was then referred to as Lake Bluff Junior High, now Lake Bluff Middle School in 1983. Graduated from Lake Forest High School in 1987. Today, as Mark told you, we are here to talk about something that's very difficult. It's hard to talk about, certainly hard to talk about for me, and it was a part of my life that was difficult, but I think it's important. And so again, I thank you for being here and getting this news out. As Mark indicated, there are, when we came forward, and I'll talk more about that later, but I really had 2 goals. And one, I wanted to make sure that Charles Ritz was not going to be around children anymore. We worked hard at that. When we first came forward, he was still employed, right? He was in the process of retiring. And I think it's important for everyone here today to know that when he left Lake Bluff, he taught for 30 years in California and continued to abuse children. I think that's very important, and we'll talk again more about that later. So we got that part done, and I'm really proud about that. So he was prosecuted, he is getting the help that he needs, and he's away from kids, and that's court ordered. Number 2, I felt very compelled that as a victim, Mark referenced the statistics, it is important to come forward. The reason that childhood sexual abuse is so prevalent in our society, a big part of it is the guilt and shame that victims feel. It makes it very difficult to come forward. So it is. It's not something anyone wants to do, but I think a big part of eradicating it and reducing those numbers is for victims to come forward. I'm going to talk a little bit more later. It's also extremely important for the institutions around these victims to take them in and help them come forward. And in our case, that didn't happen. So we got the prosecution. That's great. We're able to come forward, and I think, modestly, we were able to help others. Since I've come forward 23 months ago, not a week goes by, I don't get a phone call, a text, someone reaches out on Facebook and says, let me tell you what happened to me. Could you help with this? Can we talk about this? And I feel great about that. I'm proud of that. The third thing is Mark referenced, is we need to learn from these events if we're going to get better as a society. That hasn't happened. As Mark said, we've come forward, we've gone to the school, we have asked repeatedly. We had a very clear change.org petition outlining exactly what we were looking for. We want an apology. That's not something we learned in junior high, that's something we learned in grade school. When you do something wrong, you apologize for it. We've been unable to get the apology that we deserve. They've told us that they have policies and procedures that will prevent this from happening again. As a victim who came forward, I didn't see those policies and procedures. I saw an institution protecting itself, and that is wrong. The first and ultimate goal in these situations should be protecting the victim. And anybody who's done anything with childhood sexual abuse, they know you say 2 things. I believe you, and I'm sorry. Neither one of those happened with the Lake Bluff School District or the Board of Education. So, that's why we're here today. We are hopeful that these actions will prompt the board to do the right thing, and I am more than happy to take any questions from anyone. Please.
Can you tell us what caused you to come forward 2 years ago? What was something that prompted it, or was it something you've been struggling with all that time and finally had?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. And yeah, it was a social media post. Sitting behind you is a gentleman that was part of it as well, where someone made a comment about Charles Ritz on Facebook. They made a comment that wasn't he a funny guy the way he used to throw chalk at us. My response was, there's nothing funny about him. Charles Ritz was a pedophile. So, and again, I'm not taking credit for anything we didn't do, but well before Me Too, after my comment, there were an awful lot of Me Toos in that thread of discussion. And silly me, I thought I was the only one. So by the end of the day that day, I'd realized that his abuse had gone on for years and affected many, many, many people. It was something I never set out to do. This was a bad part in my life. It was a part that through my own subconscious and suppression and repression, I didn't think about every day. But when it came out, it came out. And within 48 hours, right, the Lake County State's Attorney who Mark referenced, and I do want to say a big thanks to them, and also the Lake Bluff Police Department did a great job. Within 48 hours, we had a full-scale criminal investigation, right? So I was kind of on a train that I didn't really realize I started. But since that point, I realized something we want to see through.
So that was a social media post?
It was a social media post. It was on Facebook, and I'm happy to give you the citation if you'd like to see it.
So how has that all played a part, meaning connecting with other people, and just, is there an angle to that where that has helped in this particular situation, the social media part of it?
Yeah, it's been vital, and I'd love to make you part of our group. It's called Bobcat Pride, just short of 1,000 members now. So a friend of mine and I were having a discussion after that post later that day, and I'd probably said a couple things on Facebook I wasn't proud of, so I called an old friend to apologize. And we learned kind of together on the phone as I was sitting in a hotel room in Columbus, Ohio, how to set up a Facebook group. And we named it, and it's had a couple different names, and we got the word out, and we all invited a few friends. And within 3 or 4 days, there were hundreds of members. I never knew Joey. Joe and I were different years in school. I never knew that he was abused by Charles Ritz. But we came together through that medium and, you know, have been together since.
Can you talk a little bit about the impact abuse has had on your life and kind of what you're dealing with now?
Sure. I think most people in the group are probably very familiar with the symptoms and ramifications of sexual abuse, right? We know what kind of the list, and again, it's hard to talk about. There's kind of a personal issue here for me, but I want to answer your question. Let's just say that everything that's on those lists, I've felt some part of that, some more than others. I'm proud, you know, I'm employed, I'm a good dad, a good husband, but listen, it's a challenge, and that's the reason we need to work to get this childhood sexual abuse eradicated. The long-term effect, this stuff doesn't go away, and that's the hard part. You need to have prevention on the front end, because treatment on the back end is difficult.
John?
Yes?
When people hear the word lawsuits, they often, or they think you're going for money. Talk a little bit more about why you're doing this. What's the motive behind it?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that question, and I will assure you, I'm the biggest cynic there is. When I see people come forward and say it's not about the money, I'm the first to shake my head and say, well, it probably is. I can assure you and everyone in this room, this all could have been settled for an I'm sorry. All settled. That's all we wanted from the beginning. We laid this out very clearly to the school district. This lawsuit is to get justice, as we said, to get policies and procedures in place so this doesn't happen again, and it's to get an audience, right? We're struggling to get their attention. I feel like I've been told specifically, don't talk to the school board, don't talk to the administration. So now they're going to have to respond to us.
Are you seeking more than an apology, though, in your action?
Yes.
Can you outline what you're seeking?
Sure.
Yeah, well, we are seeking, as part of a resolution, we'd be seeking the things we're talking about. Discovery into policies and procedures, information regarding what happened to ensure that it can't happen again. This is what we know already. We know that starting in 1975, there started being rumors, discussions about Charles Ritz, the fact that he was spending time with children outside of school, the fact that he was having house parties at people's houses and doing sexually inappropriate things with children at those parties, the fact that he would take kids on trips, and the school district and the school board knew about that. In 1985, it finally came to a head, and there was a new superintendent hired. And that new superintendent, they started calling emergency meetings about Charles Ritz in 1985 because of some incidents that had come to light. Around the same time that they started calling those meetings, there was an incident that involved Joey Lombardi, and they went to the school board. And the result of that was that the new superintendent called in Charles Ritz. He admitted when he was questioned by the police in connection with the criminal investigation, he admitted that the school board told him when he started his job that there had been rumors about Charles Ritz for 10 years, but they never did anything about it. And they never documented it. So the superintendent at the time, that's the head guy for the school district, admitted that they knew what was going on, but they didn't document it. In 1985, they told insurance carriers about Ritz. They didn't tell the parents. They didn't counsel the children. Instead, they gave Ritz a bunch of money, let him resign, and off Ritz went to California, where, as John said, he taught for another 30 years and abused who knows how many other children. We know there are California victims. Nobody knows how many.
Can you talk about, Mr. Perlman, you're laying out this timeline here of important, obviously it's going to be dates on who knew what when. At this point, I know you're saying you knew some of this stuff. Do you know this because of public records, or how do you know that this timeline existed? Meaning the insurance, like what documents do you have on all of that?
So a couple of things, and I'll let John address this, but I want to again recognize this, the group, the Bobcat Pride group, and just how much they've done and have spoon-fed us all the facts. They filed FOIA requests with everybody and anybody that could have touched this. They went out and interviewed people in the community, former teachers, former students, former administrators. And they brought us, the lawyers, all of this information. So now, again, that information is the result of their hard work and what they've did in their self-help, if you will. What we don't know is what's not documented. And our understanding is that there was a lot of things going on regarding Charles Ritz that weren't documented.
But if it would help you, I can help you with citations for everything in that timeline. We've got FOIA documentation to back that up. So,
Mark, there is one unique case to the five you're bringing that the person involved was no longer with us.
Correct.
Explain that and explain why that's going on.
Sure. One of the lawsuits, one of the 5 lawsuits, is on behalf of the children of the victim of the sex abuse. He unfortunately committed suicide. He hanged himself, and he did that shortly after he, for the first time, disclosed the abuse to his family. So he disclosed the abuse to his family. Shortly thereafter, he committed suicide. So in that regard, that claim is for the wrongful death of their father against the school district. So that claim is the legal theories are unique. The facts are really part of, the facts are all similar, all common. Ritz's MO was always the same. And another thing to remember is the school they weren't naive about who the kids were that Ritz was around all the time. It was open. Ritz was openly around these kids. So the school knew the kids that were around Ritz and the kids that weren't around Ritz. They easily, when they notified their insurance company to protect themselves financially from a lawsuit in 1985, they easily could have gone forward to the families of the kids that were around Ritz and said, hey, we want to make sure those kids are okay. We've learned some pretty significant things over the years. And they didn't. What they did is they protected the institution at the expense of children, the people that they are supposed to, their whole purpose is to protect the very people they harm the most. And frankly, based on their conduct over the last 2 years, the critical question is, what makes today any different? And so far my answer is nothing.
Mark, there are penalties the district could face criminally because of this, or is this almost a civil matter?
At this point, it's a civil matter. I do know that the state's attorney looked into the mandatory reporting laws and things of that nature. They have not brought any criminal charges. I believe there are issues with statute of limitations, or there may be, those statutes have evolved and changed over the years, and I'm just not sure what they were in 1985.
What did Ritz plead?
He pled guilty to indecent.
Public indecency.
Yeah, public indecency.
Felony level or misdemeanor level?
It's a misdemeanor, which is, but again, credit to the Lake County State's Attorney. They brought charges on a misdemeanor claim and extradited Ritz from California because that's how important this is to our society, to the people that were harmed, and to the public at large, so that they know, and frankly to the perpetrators. I'll tell you what, you're not getting away with this in Lake County, Illinois. And that's a really important message.
I'm sure you've had a chance to talk to so many other people. You're talking about how you're getting notified every week. I'm sure that's from various different cases and experiences. But up to this point, do you know other people in both of your situations, specifically with Ritz, who are contemplating coming forward? Or do you know a lot of people who actually are out there thinking about this at this point? Is it widespread? Is it just a couple? What do you?
No, Ritz taught in Lake Bluff for 11 years. This is the best answer I give to people. He taught in Lake Bluff for 11 years. He had anywhere between 3 and 5 victims per year. So that gives you a sense of the victim pool in Lake Bluff only, right? He taught totally for 40 years, and that 3 to 5 victims a year seems to stand throughout his career. So clearly, with the 5 lawsuits that are filed today, there are many out there that have not come forward. Joe and I and others have spoken to some of those folks, and for various reasons in their life, they're whatever, they've decided not to move forward, but it doesn't mean that we can't support them, right, because they're not coming forward, and I think Bobcat Pride and other mediums have allowed that to happen, so that's a good thing. That's a very good positive result of all this.
Mr. Lombardi, do you want to stand behind the microphones here and obviously give us so we could hear you? Just obviously everything that's unfolding today as well.
Sure.
Just your thoughts about moving forward with the lawsuit, and I know we've heard Mr. Bowman speak just about the whole angle of the apology, just saying I'm sorry. What is all of this mean for you personally?
Well, when I started, I was contemplating what happened back in the 80s, and I was thinking about it's a new time now, and maybe the people who made these mistakes in the past probably aren't around anymore. It was a different time back then. Things have changed, and things are probably better now. And then fast forward to what's going on now, I feel that exactly the same thing I was feeling back then. Just being shut out, especially when I went forward to the principal and told him what happened. It seems like they just want this to go away. They're hoping if they wait long enough, this abuse will just disappear. I don't see them as being proactive towards the children. I'm worried about the children today. So maybe this will get their attention.
Joey, what would you, in addition to that, what would you like to see come out or happen as a result of your litigation?
I'd like to put a little more fear into future pedophiles, letting them know that they just can't do this thing. As it stands, it seems with the Lake Bluff district, maybe they have some wiggle room there, and let them know that no, anywhere you go, you're going to be shut down.
Joey, just a bookkeeping question. Can you spell your first and last name for me?
I can. Actually, it's Joey, Joseph Lombardi, Joey Lombardi.
Do you prefer Joseph or Joey?
It's Joey Lombardi.
Okay.
And I think what both Joey and John are talking about is so important. So often the focus of these claims is on the perpetrator. But the truth of the matter is the way these perpetrators typically access children is through the job they're doing, whether it be a teacher or a coach or a clergy member. And the truth of the matter is that the institutions can be more responsible and put an end to this quicker. We may always have bad actors, but if the institutions start speaking about this and start putting the interest of children or abused adults ahead of their institutional concerns, then we have a real chance to at least curtail or put an end to child sex abuse. And this is a call for institutional change. Not talking about it is no longer acceptable. That's not going to make it go away any longer.